I'm Catherine Carpenter. I'm the advocacy strategist at MCI, and I'm also the youth advisory board liaison. We're really excited to have you all and to have four wonderful panelists today who are all youth working in male contraceptive advocacy and research. So just a little about the structure for today. Each panelist will have about 10 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions at the end with the audience. So you'll get to chat with them a little bit, and I ask you to just hold your questions to the end. I'm going to just give a brief intro to each panelist, and then we'll go ahead and start with Simran and Diba. So Simran, Mayra, and Diba Dindoust are two high school students from Canada, and they're using blockchain to accelerate the development of non-hormonal reversible male contraception. Kenitimi Bikikoro is at Niger Delta University in Nigeria. His research focuses on predicting potential immunocontraception candidates for possible postmeiotic male contraception. He is one of our inaugural Youth Advisory Board grantees. And Madeline Mahoney is an undergrad at University of Chicago and is working with Planned Parenthood North Central States on a survey assessing attitudes towards new methods of male contraception for people who've had vasectomies. And she's also one of our inaugural Youth Advisory Board grantees. So we are going to go ahead and get it started with Simran and Diba. I'll let you guys take it away.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to meet you all virtually. My name is Simran, and I'm 16 years old.
Simran, just wanted to share that your slides are not sharing properly.
Oh. Can you not see them? Like you couldn't see them? Or...
we can see your notes.
Oh.
Good. There you go.
Yeah, so I'm Diba Dindoust. I'm also 17, and we're both high school students from Toronto, Canada.
One sec, guys. It's like really glitching out for me. Just give me a second. I'll reshare. Okay. Yeah, so we are working on accelerating the development of a non-hormonal male contraceptive.
Today, we wanted to talk to you about all the work we've done till now and what we have planned for over the summer.
So I'll just give you a quick intro on myself. Since I was 8 years old, I wanted to be at the forefront of medical research. And it was only last year that I started getting involved in biotech. So I spent some time in longevity. I did stuff in senescent cells and epigenetics. And then after that, I got an internship at a precision med company. Then I kind of switched gears, started looking to reproductive biology and women's health specifically. I find hormones so interesting, so I did a lot of work there. And now I'm working with Diba on male contraception. And for me, the next few years are looking a lot like traveling, meeting cool people, and solving hard problems in biology.
Yeah, so same here. I really got into biotech because it's so interesting that existing biological systems can be taken apart to solve old and new problems. And so for me, I got very much involved with gene editing and applying that to HIV. I then interned with a gene editing company. And since last year, I've been building projects using AI in drug discovery. And I've had the opportunities to present my work at conferences. And here I am today working on male birth control, which is wonderful because it allows me to bringing my passion for gender equality, which is something I've always cared for.
And so Diba and I, we actually met at this program called the Knowledge Society, which is an Olympic level training program for future innovators and CEOs. And so this whole project actually started back in November during a hackathon that was put together by our program. And we had 24 hours to come up with some interesting idea and identify how exactly would this work if it were to be executed. And so the solution we came up with was using machine learning to identify small molecule drugs that can inhibit proteins that give sperm the shape that allows them to actually fertilize the egg. So we won first place in this hackathon and decided, hey, we want to spend a lot more time furthering this project.
So to do this, we decided to take a step back and go look at the root causes of the problem first. So we asked ourselves, why is there no non-hormonal male birth control yet? The two root causes we found was first, a lack of funding on the part of big pharma, which has put the burden on nonprofits and governments. And then the second problem was high safety expectations, which exist for any sort of contraceptive. So we then decided to focus on the high safety expectations problem. And the solution that we wanted to pursue was drug repurposing, which is essentially repositioning an FDA-approved drug for a new indication.
Yeah, so this hypothesis of repurposing drugs, it aligned really well with our goal, which was to accelerate the development of a pill. Because drug repurposing is faster, it's cheaper, and there's less risk of failure because these compounds have already been approved by the FDA. And so in addition to all of these points on the slide, like you can see there's obviously the time, it's much less, the money is much less, and there's less stages because there's less risk, right? And so a great example of repurposing drugs is actually Viagra, which we did a case study on. It's well known and talked about in the scientific community. And essentially that drug, it was created for hypertension, but then repurposed for erectile dysfunction. So at this point, we wanted to learn the science that could apply to repurposing drugs and also get a good sense of where everybody else is in the space. So during this time, we solidified our knowledge of spermatogenesis, pathways involved in sperm development and maturation. Then we did like a landscape analysis, and we learned about gels, nanocontraception, heat contraception, biodegradable implants, and of course, compounds. And during this time, we also got a great idea of the like labs and nonprofits involved. So that's how we actually got involved with MCI. We found them online and we thought they were doing amazing work and we really wanted to be a part of it.
So how we first went about the drug repurposing was through a manual literature review. And we found a really cool drug, nifedipine, which is a calcium ion channel blocker used for high blood pressure. But since it had cardiac implications, we thought that it would have a lot more safety tests that would have to be done, and it would completely destroy the purpose of drug repurposing as a solution. So then we decided to take a computational approach to identify a more specific FDA-approved drug that we could repurpose. And how we wanted to do this was to train a machine learning model on a data set of compounds that have already been tested against a sperm maturation target and had their bioactivity metric determined. And so have the machine learning model then predict the bioactivity metric, like the IC50 value of FDA-approved molecules. But there was a huge problem with this solution, which was there was no data set like that available on the internet. And when we tried to get this from private sources, it was extremely hard due to lack of open sourcing and extreme privatization of data sets in the field.
So at this point, we were like, okay, what do you do? If there's no data set of compounds, can we make our own data set of disease compound relations? And we did a lot of research and we found this thing called a knowledge graph. And this idea was actually inspired by one of the top AI startup companies called Benevolent AI. And a knowledge graph would basically be put together by natural language processing. And it would allow you on a high level to find the relationships between compounds, proteins, and genes.
But once more, when we went to actually implement the solution, we went to experts and validated with them. And they said that this solution is extremely hard. It'll take a lot of time to gain prerequisites to apply it. And for us, our goal here is to accelerate the development of a non-hormonal male birth control pill. So we want the solution with the highest return on investment where we can implement it faster and have some sort of impact in the field faster. So we decided to go back to this root cause analysis we did, and we wanted to focus instead on the first root cause, which was the lack of funding. So this time, we wanted to use decentralized autonomous organizations built on blockchain to address this problem. So how DAOs are helpful here is because they increase public funding. The system of DAOs, the great thing about them is anyone with a token can invest in projects in the field. And so even members of the general public or people who are just in the space of blockchain, but not in drug discovery necessarily, can get involved and fund projects. And also it encourages collaboration because if a investigation is successful, then the patent is owned by anyone within that DAO. So anyone within the public, all the other research groups in that DAO can share the data that every group is producing. And lastly, because it involves so many stakeholders, it increases the awareness for the need of a male birth control pill.
And so there's been a lot of pivoting back and forth, a lot of iteration, as you can see throughout our presentation. The thing is, we aren't really attached to any solution, rather focused on our goal, which is, hey, we want to contribute to the field of male contraception, and we want to accelerate the development of a non-hormonal male contraceptive. And so in the coming months, where we're headed next is, one, we want to get some lab experience. And so we're in talks with several labs right now just to get our hands dirty and get a taste of how it is to kind of actually work, directly with these compounds and really get a good understanding of that. And then secondly, we are going to be building the DAO for the male birth control funding, as Diba mentioned a few minutes ago. And then we are going to be speaking about our ideas a lot more. We're focused on advocacy as well during this time. So just advocating for male contraception in general. And so Collision that we mentioned on the slide is actually a huge tech conference in Toronto. And so we're going to be speaking to thousands of people about male contraception in June. And then lastly, we want to be building deeper relationships with stakeholders. So people like everybody on this call, we just want to, get a better sense of the field by networking with people here and building something beautiful together. And so we'd love to connect with you guys after this presentation and get to know everybody better.
So why is it that we care about accelerating the development of a male birth control pill? Well, I mean, obviously we can take this pill, but it's not about just the person who's taking the pill, but everyone else involved. As we've seen with the current female contraceptives, it's not just about the woman, it's everyone else involved, all their partners and everything. So a male birth control pill is a story for everyone. On one hand, we have the problem of hormonal female contraceptives, which have lots of side effects, as well that even with the contraceptives we have today, more than 50% of pregnancies in the US are still unwanted. And also the reproductive burden has fallen on women for far too long. And on the side of men, well, they haven't had as much reproductive autonomy as women have had. So if we truly want net gender equality, then we also need to balance the field in reproductive health as well. And our motivation here, what's really driving us, is truly that net gender equality.
Yeah, thank you for listening, guys.
Simran and Diba, that was amazing. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure there will be some questions from the audience at the end. In the meantime, I will pass it over to Kenitimi.
So Kenitimi is trying to set up my system. I had some issues with. So my research focus is on predicting potential immunocontraceptive candidates related to the epididymis for possible post-meiotic male contraception. So the focus of my research work is to bring some interest or some focus to the epididymis. Now it's an extra, or they say an accessory reproductive organ or sperm producers. And the interesting thing about it is that the epididymis is where the sperm actually becomes fully mature enough to fertilize a egg. So considering that, with available literature posits that right there in the epididymis is where the sperm is battered in the epidermal milieu, and right in the milieu, some proteins are responsible for the sperm to attain maturity. So the whole idea about seeking for a vaccine candidate or an immunocontraceptive candidate is the fact that we know how the body works. The reproductive system is actually, they say, immune privileged. By that, it means that since the reproductive system develops later on in life and following puberty, during sensitization of the immune system, the reproductive system, including the epididymal proteins, are excluded. So to the body, the proteins found in the reproductive system are foreign. So what we are trying to achieve with this present investigation is to see the properties of these proteins, identify the proteins first, and then see their properties, and from their properties be able to predict using computational tools how they will fit for possible drug candidates in the course of seeking contraceptive options. Now, the interesting thing about the work I'm doing is that it is a twofold computational activity. Twofold in the sense that everything I'm doing at the moment, it's computational. So from identifying the target proteins, then from really defining if the proteins are suitable for the job at hand, it's all happening computational. So how do we do this? We use applications of machine learning, particularly natural language processing, to probe already existing data in public databases like PubMed and other available databases. So we developed a model to see how best these proteins are reported in the literature. So far, we focused on proteins um, that are found in the body and tail regions of, because the epidermis has three regions, which they refer to as the corpus, cauda, and caput, or the head, the body, and the tail. So our major interest is the proteins that are found within the body and the tail regions, because that is where they spend most of their time before exit for ejaculation purposes. So we are now using machine learning techniques, particularly natural language processing, to identify possible proteins that are found within these regions. And so far, we've been able to identify at least some 5 protein candidates. Now, the interesting thing about this protein candidate that we've seen is we now use these protein candidates, subject them to some other computational activity, which we now call an immunoinformatics workflow. Now, what is the immunoinformatics workflow intending to achieve for us? The immunoinformatics workflow will help us properly use computational tools to profile the nature of these proteins of interest. So some of the features of these proteins that we are looking out for are: what is the immunogenicity? What is the molecular weight of the protein? Or what is the affinity of the protein in question, and what is the size? Is it a small molecule that can easily pass through the blood tissue barrier, or is it something that we can see how best to be able to trick the system into allowing these proteins live and enter the immune system and produce required antibodies that can bind to sperm cells and prevent their maturation. So far, that is what we've been probing with mentors on ground, even here in the Niger Delta University. Or at the time, nationwide, we have an industrial action. So though I don't have a lecturer that is attending to my research needs at the moment, I'm still trying as much as I can to use available literature to further cleanse the data I have and further see what I can do to be sure that, okay, I have a viable candidate at the end of the day. Thank you.
Amazing, Kenitimi. Thank you so much. That was wonderful, and we really appreciate it. I'm sure there will be questions for you as well. And I will now pass off to Madeline.
Hello, everybody. My name is Madeline Mahoney. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently a second-year student at the University of Chicago, majoring in philosophy, and I'm also pre-med. I'm very grateful and excited to be talking to you all today as one of MCI's Youth Advisory Board grantees. A little bit of background about me. I've been working as a research assistant with the research team at Planned Parenthood North Central States, or PPNCS, for the past 2.5 years. And through Planned Parenthood, I've been able to work on a variety of projects, including clinical trials for point-of-care STI testing, a trial for a new IUD, and research of the effects of tear gas on reproductive health, among other things. This work has really allowed me to explore my interest in sexual and reproductive health and has led me to the field of male contraception. So we have been doing a project for a little over a year at PPNCS, which uses surveys and focus groups to assess attitudes towards novel methods of contraception for people who produce sperm. And being involved in this project at PPNCS has been my first real introduction to the field of male contraception. I think this is a really important area of work. I'm committed to the principle of reproductive autonomy for all people. And right now, people who are assigned male at birth really do not have any fully reversible and highly effective options for controlling their fertility aside from condoms. And I think that's something that needs to change. I think this field is really important, but it's also relatively neglected. So I'm very glad to have this opportunity to contribute in a small way. One note is that for the sake of inclusivity and accuracy, I will be using the phrase contrasperm or birth control for sperm rather than male contraception for the rest of the presentation today. In addition to inclusivity, accessibility of language should be considered, but I do think that because this is an emerging field, we have this really unique opportunity to carefully consider the impact of language and potentially introduce new terms. So I found out about MCI's Youth Advisory Board grant over the summer, and I was very excited to apply. I think it's really unique to find support for independent research at the undergraduate level. So my research project is assessing the experiences and attitudes of people who are already using essentially the only highly effective contraceptive method there is for people who produce sperm, and that's vasectomy, through an online survey. So the research questions guiding my project are, first of all, because there are limited contraceptive methods for people assigned male at birth, would Contrasperm options provide a preferred alternative to vasectomy for a significant proportion of patients who have had a vasectomy? Secondly, what qualities would participants look for in Contrasperm, and which methods would they be most inclined to use were they available? Thirdly, how do vasectomy patients' experiences with the procedure and their desire for future biological children influence their attitudes toward contrasperm? And then finally, what do people with vasectomies know about vasectomy reversibility, and how does this factor into their decision to have a vasectomy? In some ways, people with vasectomies might seem like an odd demographic to study, but I think there's some really interesting things in the literature that led me to want to explore this area. First of all, the reversal rate for vasectomy is estimated to be about 6%. And although vasectomy reversals are performed with fairly high success rates, I do wonder if some people undergoing vasectomy reversals would have been better served by a fully reversible method of contraception. Also, just for reference, there are about 500,000 vasectomies performed annually in the US. Another interesting thing is that there was this analysis of National Survey of Family Growth data that found that nearly 20% of men with vasectomies desired future biological children. This finding was really surprising and also mildly concerning. And then finally, studies have found generally higher patient satisfaction from tubal ligation over vasectomy, despite the fact that that method is actually more invasive. And so I was thinking it's possible that this gap in satisfaction could be explained by the fact that when somebody's choosing tubal ligation, they're choosing it over a range of different contraceptive methods, whereas vasectomy is the only highly effective method for people assigned male at birth. So for all of those reasons, I thought this was an important demographic to study. I developed a survey that's been sent to people who've had vasectomies at PPNCS since 2013. I'd especially like to thank Ali Oyanan Goldsmith, Asha Hassan, and Dr. Christy Boris at PPNCS and Catherine Carpenter at MCI for their really valuable feedback in the creation of this survey. So for my survey, the eligibility criteria are people who've had a vasectomy, are 18 years or older, can read, write, and speak English, and are willing to participate in an online survey. The survey includes multiple choice, ranked choice, and open-ended questions to address my research questions alongside demographic information. The Youth Advisory Board grant from MCI allows me to offer lottery compensation method of $50 $20 gift cards, and based on past literature, I expect this to increase response rate, and so this grant is what makes this project possible. I've obtained IRB approval from the University of Minnesota IRB, and the survey was launched on March 31st. We are currently in the data collection phase. As of Monday, April 18th, the survey had 170 records with 144 complete responses, and our goal number of responses is somewhere in the 200 to 300 range. My primary focus is the question, if a different method of birth control for sperm that was highly effective, non-surgical, and fully reversible had been available to participants, would it have changed their decision to get a vasectomy? At this point, 29% of participants have said it would be likely or very likely that the availability of a different contraceptive method would have changed their decision to have a vasectomy, which seems pretty significant. Another interesting finding is that 30% of participants said vasectomies were not reversible. Vasectomies are reversible, but these participants were not more likely to say their decision to have a vasectomy would have been changed by the availability of other contraceptive methods. Those are just a couple of preliminary findings from the data so far, and I'm really looking forward to analyzing it in more depth once the data collection phase is closed. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to do this work. It's been a great experience to take on more responsibility for a project, and I'm very excited to keep working on this research project and be involved in this evolving field. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madeline. That was great. We really appreciate you sharing your work. At this point, we can go ahead and open it up to our audience here for any questions or comments or anything you would like to talk to our wonderful panelists about. And I know Jalen, myself, and Heather have lots of questions too, but we'll let anyone else go ahead and ask your questions. So you can just unmute and speak, or you can also put your questions in the chat. I can also kick it off here with a question.
Margaret,
or Jalen, do you have any? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Margaret was raising her hand.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead, Margaret.
It's Peggy Batten. This is the same question I'm always asking, but I'd like to ask it of everybody. Do you understand these male methods as alternatives to female methods, or that both parties would make use of contraception? That is, it's a question about shifting. I was very struck by the first group, Simran, Mayra, and Diba, the emphasis on gender equality as a motivator for this. But the question is, would gender equality be better preserved if both the male and the female were to use reliable contraception? But every group, every party that's spoken so far could answer this question. As I say, this is something of a repeated concern, but I think it's genuinely important.
Yeah, no, Diba, you can go.
Yeah, I think for us, when we talk about net gender equality, we're talking about also equal responsibility when it comes to reproduction. So personally for us, we ideally see both men and women using contraceptives at the same time. So once more, we don't have that imbalance, but towards men this time. And I think maybe that wasn't like communicated that clearly in our presentation, but we're not that focused on like bringing it more towards men, but actually just balancing that scale.
Yeah, great.
All right, it looks like Madeline, we have a question for you in the chat. Corey asks, could you describe to us why you choose to use the term contrasperm versus male contraception?
Yes, so sorry, I have a bit of a cold. My COVID test is pending. So we originally started using the term Contrasperm with our other project through MCI. And I think that phrase itself is still kind of in the works or just something we're trying out. We also use like the phrase birth control for sperm a lot. But I think that overall the idea, you know, maybe Contrasperm specifically you can think of as a bit of a placeholder, but just overall the idea is that we would like to use a more accurate and gender neutral term. And so for our surveys, both for my vasectomy project and for our other project, we collect demographic information, and a lot of people don't use he, him pronouns and don't identify as cis men. And so I think we just would like to reflect the reality of that, and then also allow people of all gender identities to like feel affirmed in the contraceptive method they're using, yeah, I did have somebody specifically note, a trans woman noted in the vasectomy survey that it was actually kind of affirming for her to have a vasectomy and stop using sperm. And so that's why we try to use that language. Specifically, the phrase Contrasperm might not be what catches on or we end up going with, but I think that using more gender neutral language than male contraception is important. And I do think that accessibility of language is important, but I also just feel like because this is such an evolving field, it feels like a really good time to be careful about our language now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline. We have another question. Apologies, Linda, I missed this one. Linda would like to learn more about Kenitimi's background and interest in this area. Kenitimi, if you want to share a little more about your background and interest.
Yeah, thank you. So a senior year student of medical laboratory science. But then my interest in the area is I love the novelty of the area, for the fact that it's been over ages when the very first male contraceptive pill was discovered for the female counterparts. So I tend to ask myself, what is happening? Why is there not much interest, especially here in Africa, in this area? So it's a less talked about subject in my environment, and I would love to start the conversation. I would love our life scientists to start looking into this research field and contribute to it, because clearly we are all facing the challenges of improper family planning activities here in Africa. So that is what spurred on my interest. One is novelty. Two is the fact that, okay, there should be a reproductive autonomy situation. And then another fact is the fact that I would love to start the conversation here in my local client.
I have a more of a comment / question, but this is Paige from Planned Parenthood North Central States. And I just wanted to comment that I really appreciated what Madeline said about not gendering the contraceptive methods. And I was curious to see if other presenters have ideas for maybe how to make their language more accessible. I mean, I do at Planned Parenthood, we see a ton of different people who identify as non-binary or who identify as trans who are seeking contraception, or people who are not in straight relationships. So I was just curious if folks had thought about that before, and if they're interested in kind of expanding the scope of the language they use after this presentation.
Yeah, of course. It was really nice to hear your presentation, Madeline. I appreciate it as well. And I think, yeah, this is something that is really important to think about. And I'm happy that you brought it up, because I had thought about it before, but it wasn't at the top of the mind while delivering our presentation specifically. And so, yeah, I definitely think for us too, we will, expand our language and make it more accessible when we do speak. I'm not sure if we, yeah, I think that's definitely like important to us as well. And yeah, I appreciate that you brought it up.
Well, I'm not obviously I'm not a presenter here today, but I feel like this is a great conversation to have, Paige. And oh, sorry, I forgot to turn this on. And I feel like with the name like Male Contraceptive Initiative, it might be worth mentioning that this is something we do think about for the future as well. And we're starting to bring more inclusive language into our practice as well, and have indeed already a sort of backup list of names for the organization. So I do think this is an important conversation for the community to be thinking about, particularly as we're coming in with new methods. And, we talk about this a lot at MCI, that we're creating a method mix for men and women. So we have to stop thinking of contraception as being men's contraception and women's contraception. So to have that introduction align with the changing norms around gender and sexuality, I think is natural and a really well-timed opportunity.
Yeah, and I also think, like Madeline was it Madeline? I think Paige said that, like, how can we kind of make it more accessible in the field in general? And I think one way is by doing presentations like these, right? Like having these conversations in panels of large groups of people. And especially like when we go and we speak at our next conference, you know, you keep those things in mind and then you keep bettering the way that you present. And then eventually the language catches on to like larger amounts of people.
Okay, looks like Jalen has a question for Madeline. If you are getting perspectives from non-cis, non-hetero people in your survey.
Yes, I would say for the vasectomy survey, it has mostly been cis men who use he, him pronouns, but especially for our other project through MCI. So this is assessing attitudes, not among people who've had vasectomies, just among anybody basically who's been into the clinic recently and is like sexually active and trying to avoid pregnancy. I think those are the main eligibility criteria. Going through, we're still kind of cleaning the data for that. But as I went through to like give people gift cards and I would just kind of see demographic information. And this might be, you know, more specific to Planned Parenthood, but there definitely are a lot of people who do not identify within the gender binary. And I think just seeing all the people who appreciate our neutrality of language and whatnot, just kind of affirms that that's how we want to approach it. And so, yeah, the demographics at Planned Parenthood might be slightly different, but overall, yeah, I think it's important either way.
Sorry, I don't want to, I feel like I don't want to dominate here, but I am really curious and I want to follow up on something that I noted that Steve Lerneau put in the chat about just the discussion around vasectomy these days. I know at MCI, we field a lot of general conversations from our social media and from young people. And one of the things, at least that I'm finding very concerning, is that a lot of young men are somewhat cavalier about the idea of getting a vasectomy and just quote unquote having it reversed eventually. And I think, I'm wondering if you guys hear this in your friend groups, your social circles, or if you've come across it in your research, because you know that it's not really meant to go into, yes, it is reversible, but it's not guaranteed reversible and it's not truly meant to be reversible. So that's something we're also working on, trying to build some advocacy language around, but I'm curious around your thoughts on that.
Sorry, I don't want to speak too much here, but I do have some thoughts. I do think I definitely hear it kind of thrown around by young people as vasectomy is, oh, you can just have that done and then have it reversed whenever you want to. And although vasectomy reversals are quite effective, you know, if you got an IUD and there was a 1 in 10 chance it would make you infertile, then you wouldn't just get an IUD. And so I think that's definitely important to consider. In some past research, they asked a question and it was on whether vasectomies were reversible, yes or no, as an open-ended text question. And they ended up having a lot of people just saying yes or no. And in some ways, like neither one of those answers is exactly right. I did decide to, in my survey, make that question just yes or no, so that it would be a little bit easier in the analysis phase, because I was curious if people who don't think it's reversible would be more interested in other contraceptive methods. But I think, yeah, I think there is a lot of confusion around the reversibility of vasectomy. But then in the open text portion of my survey, a lot of people have been saying, like, I think people do tend to understand that, like, they'll say things like, oh, I wish I would have had those options when I was younger, but now that I know I really don't want any more children, that's why I got the vasectomy. So I think overall in the survey, it seems like people understand that, but you definitely do hear, especially younger people throwing around like, oh, every man should get a vasectomy and then they'll just reverse them or something like that.
I think for us too, because we're an age group younger than Madeline. So it is just a tiny bit different where my peers, at least, they don't know much about male contraceptives, or even vasectomies is something that they barely know anything about. And all this new fields of research with targeting sperm maturation pathways, that it's completely new to them. And just today I had a conversation with some friends about my own project, and they're all just like, oh, how would a male birth control pill even look like? So awareness and education, I think, is quite lower in our generation, at least.
Yeah, or our group as like high school students, I think Diba is referring to.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Stephen, go for it.
Okay, thanks. And so I think that this was sort of covered in the sense that what happens is younger people tend to talk to their friends about these issues and make decisions based on what their friends and peer group do. Or maybe even worse in certain cases, looking in the wrong places online about getting their information. And so, you know, if people were very intentional about their sex life and they were using vasectomy, everybody would bank sperm, especially if you took a look at the divorce rate as being 50%. You might already have your kids, and then you get a vasectomy, and then maybe it reverses, maybe it doesn't, and you get divorced, and you get remarried, and surprise, you're not able to do it. You know, if people were looking at this from maximizing your options, they would always bank sperm in a sperm bank before they got a vasectomy. At least that's my opinion. Thank you.
I will really see that as a very nice take. That's an interesting way to go around the issue. Because on the subject of vasectomy, that is quite known among adults here in Nigeria. But whenever I mention it, it feels like a taboo. They feel like you want to. Sometimes they clearly tell you that me get castrated. That's the word they use. Like I'll get castrated, and and they feel like so I will not be able to go on to extend my family's lineage. You want to castrate me like a dog. Sometimes that's the word they use. So if such options are out there on the table and they are made to understand that this is how it actually works, it's a nice take actually.
In this discussion of vasectomy and the possibility of reversal or sperm banking, we have to talk about cost. This would work in favor of the research that's being done. Performing vasectomy itself is pretty cheap. Reversing it, as I understand it, is not at all cheap. And the cost of sperm storage over an extended period of time aren't cheap either. So there's an issue here about access and the situation of people with less in the way of means. I assume that's part of the concern in the research that's going on. Whatever methods there are developed need to be accessible to everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important point. It's something we think about a lot as an organization.
I bet, yeah.
Any of the panelists want to comment on cost? Or maybe more broadly, accessibility?
And here, just to further provoke the panel, I guess it's worth thinking about the female methods and the cost over time for the 40 years of female fertility. So the pill is, of course, much more expensive than the IUD. IUD, although it's sometimes the price, not cost, but the price is high. But if it lasts over 10, 12 years, something like that, the actual total cost outlay is much lower. It's also worth knowing that the manufacturing price, I understand it, of the female IUD, the copper 7, is, I believe, on the order of 40 cents. So we have to think about price increases, price, that doesn't include placement, but that's not need not be dramatically expensive. And we'd want to make sure that any male, or how should I refer to this, Madeline, any Contrasperm devices or medications are as low cost as possible. Yeah. What's the right way to refer to this, Madeline?
We've been using the term Contrasperm, but that's just within our group. But then we also say birth control.
That's about the biological material itself, right? But how do you like to refer to someone who might be a sperm producer, but whose gender identity is different?
Exactly that. We say people who produce sperm.
Okay.
I have sort of a broader question here as we have about 10 minutes left. I'd like to hear from each of the panelists about what you think the next generation of contraception will look like.
Can I go?
Please, yes.
Okay. Looking from the angle of science and what is happening in the research area, we are being ushered into the age of precision medicine and personalized medicine and the likes of it. And this is seriously driven by genomic technologies and big data and the likes of it. So I do think that most of the answers to the future of contraception will be, or the answers are already there. For me personally, my take is the answers are there, but the answers are just sitting there as data that has been accumulated over the years. And that is why I subscribed to use the approach which I choose to use. I did not go about trying to do the traditional wet lab investigation techniques, because over time, people have done a lot using available technologies in the wet lab scenario. And since we are in the fourth paradigm of science, which is really data intensive, I think our ability to process this data so that data becomes valuable information, and this information gets to become knowledge, which can in turn help us make informed decisions by way of display of wisdom. So we have to be very intentional about how we harness available data. Data is already there. So I feel that the future of contraception lies in our abilities on how to handle already existing data that is staring at us.
Yeah, thank you for that. I am going to just go ahead and kick it to Simran and Diba.
I can start off the answer and then Simran can add on. But I think for me and Simran, we've looked more into the future of a pill and not much into like current methods like vasectomies. So we can speak a bit to where we see the pill going and if they're like what we think will happen with that. So given the landscaping that we did, we saw a lot of work being done with medical devices, much more than compounds. And the medical devices are farther ahead in their development, given that one of them, and I believe a few others are in clinical trials. Yeah. Sorry. and whereas compounds still have not entered clinical trials. So I think, in my opinion, we'll probably see medical devices like gels, implants come out earlier, and then after that, something similar to the pill that currently exists for female users.
Yeah. And I think as we get more data, like Diba and I mentioned in our presentation, a roadblock that we had was like access to data and like privatization of data. And I think as data increases and the transparency increases, I would think that like more use of computational methods would be used to kind of identify these targets and identify these compounds. And so I think there's going to be a larger use of tech in the drug development itself. And it also seems like the future, it will bring choices for contraception that, include fewer side effects, like more holistically fewer side effects, more effective, like non-hormonal methods, like the stuff that we're working on, better protection against STIs, and like a more just overall equal sharing of responsibility between men and women both. And that's what I think the future is looking like from all the work that we've done so far.
Thank you. And Madeline, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of echoing what people have already said, but I think in addition to safety and efficacy, I think focus on patient acceptability is going to be very important in this next generation of contraception. And I think that MCI is doing a lot of that with the focus on hormonal methods specifically.
Thank you all for those perspectives. We have just a couple minutes here. Does anyone have one last question, or Jalen and Heather, anything you would like to ask before we wrap up?
I don't have a question, but I wanted to just say that, just to give a shout out to Parsimus, if we could, for actually funding our the Youth Advisory Board grant. This was our inaugural year of it last year, and I want to take a moment. Oh, there's Linda. Hi. Thank you, Linda. And you can all see that we've been blown away, and I want to shamelessly take a moment to thank Catherine and Jalen and the rest of the Youth Advisory Board for all of their hard work. Every time we've had a conversation with one of our panelists, we've walked away just our minds blown and our hearts filled with promise and hope. So I hope that you all feel the same way. Thank you all for participating is really the last thing I wanted to say, because it really is so inspiring to see young people taking control and really getting into the science. And you're doing amazing work, and we're all super proud of you, and we're here for you. If you need any support, you know where to find us.
Yeah, and speaking of that, if you guys, you being our panelists, if you would like to put your emails in the chat in case people want to be, or your LinkedIn profiles or whatever you feel comfortable with, so that people know where to find you if they'd like to reach out or learn more, collaborate, or whatever that looks like. Anyone can also reach out to us at MCI, and we'll be happy to connect you. With that, I just have a couple thank yous before we wrap up. Thank you for the panelists for doing this work and for sharing it. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the attendees for your interest in this work. We are really excited about it, obviously, and are happy that you are as well. Thank you to MCI for all of the support that the organization gives these young people who are working in male contraception. I can attest they're all really, really wonderful to work with, and as you can see, are already contributing to the field. And it's not every organization that funds people who are this early on in their career. So I think that's really wonderful. And again, just want to give a quick shout out to Parsimus. That support for the YAB grant was foundational and helped us be able to directly be able to support these students' work. So we really, really appreciate it. It had a huge impact. That is all I had to say. I really appreciate you all coming. This will be up on our website soon, and don't hesitate to reach out with anything. Thank you so much.